Hi, everyone joining us live and anyone that's joining us on the recording or on YouTube or anywhere else. I am Victor Lopez, founder and CEO of FlexPoint. I'm excited to have on this most recent episode of Inflection Point, good friend Dan Lee, founder and CEO of Red Cup IT. So Dan, thanks for joining. Excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Victor. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're gonna talk about some fun stuff, some security stuff. Might have some spicy takes, as some of my friends like to call them, but should be a good conversation. So Dan, maybe for folks that aren't as familiar with you, maybe just give a quick introduction on yourself and a little bit about Red Cup IT.
All right. Yeah, I'm Dan, founder of Red Cup IT. We started around 15 years ago. I actually started out of college and it started out as a computer repair shop, with a retail front. So we
Yeah.
had a few thousand customers that would come to our location in Santa Ana, California, and we would fix Mac laptops, Windows laptops. I think once somebody asked if we could fix an Xbox, and we had to say no to them. But we had all sorts of people coming through, and it was a good business. However, it was very variable, right? So
Yeah.
whoever walked in or whoever we could advertise to would come, and so it wasn't a sustainable business model that could grow. And so we went to start supporting businesses, and we had a Craigslist ad that was the best looking ad. Everyone would have a text-based ad, and we had a picture on ours, so it
Yeah.
ranked really well, and we did well. And Taco Bell found us, so that was one of our first large customers. Was Taco Bell headquarters in Irvine.
Nice.
And then off of that logo, we were able to build trust with local businesses in Orange County and grow from there. And
Nice.
in the last few years, we're now more focused on fintech, health tech, enterprise B2B SaaS companies, and pretty much anyone that needs like security compliance and in
Yeah.
regulated industries are a
Yeah.
good fit for
Awesome.
us. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. I don't think I knew that the Craigslist ad gets you a Taco Bell as your first customer. That's a pretty good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unique. I wonder if that still works, right? You hear people talking about like Craigslist, and maybe I'm sure there's still a lot of people out there who are using Craigslist and going in there for their
You
needs,
know
maybe
what?
their IT needs beyond
Let's
that.
make a updated flex point ad and a red cup ad
Yeah,
and see how we
put
do.
it on Craigslist. Yeah. I'm still waiting for, people talk about like the next generation of Craigslist, but like I think the reason why Craigslist is so successful is because it's so simple. So I think it's kind of hard to beat. So awesome. So yeah, so you mentioned Red Cup kind of transformed from I think which is pretty similar story to a lot of other MSPs, MSSPs out there, right? You kind of start out fixing computers, retail locations, and you kind of transform into um, a trusted advisor. And so I know, Dan, you and I met just because you guys sort of focus on like high growth companies, right? You mentioned SaaS companies and
Mhm.
things like that. And one of the first conversations we had was around just your approach to security, right? So I think everyone obviously in the space, all MSPs and MSSPs are focused on security. It's obviously one of the things that top of mind for everyone. But what I thought was so interesting and really like one of the things that had a lasting impression on me was just like your approach to the type of tools that you use and essentially the things that you do, which I think are probably different from others. So I guess let's start with like just the high level Dan Lee view of like what you think the MSP's role is in like SMB, mid-sized company security.
I think number one role is education. So
Mhm.
right when you first meet a customer, or right when we met, for example, is I want to learn about what are you doing. So the customer is educating us, and then we're educating them about our capabilities, our culture, our mindset, and seeing if it's a fit. If it's not a fit, then you want to continue educating over time and seeing if you can come together. And if you can, then that's when you should partner. And I think it's customers are more like partners to us versus actual customers because we want to get in there, and then when we're going through an audit together, and helping our customers go through an audit or security and compliance audit. We're, managing the systems, we're helping represent them in a way as well, and or we're attesting on our side, and then the customer tests to it. So it's actually more
Yeah.
of a partnership than a typical vendor relationship. And so that I think that definitely helps us become more of a trusted advisor versus a vendor
Yeah.
to our SMB customers. And I
Yeah.
think
I mean, that's important,
that
right? So
definitely
I
it's a
think,
main role. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean that's an important aspect of it as well, right? Like especially when it comes to security, being the trusted advisor. So I guess I would say that's probably not that different, right? Like I think most MSPs are like, hey, like we want to be a trusted advisor. So what would you say makes your guys' approach different from like, if I'm a small business or whatever, like I'm a software company out, I'm out in the market for, a security or an MSP specifically. What would you say is like your differentiated approach, like especially when it comes to your approach to security and making sure these businesses are protected?
I think first off is as an MSP, we have to protect ourselves and practice what we preach. And
Yeah,
so everyone can go to security.redcupit.com, and that's our trust portal where you can see our ISO 27001 certificate. You can see our SOC 2 Type 2 report and any other reports that we have on there and our penetration tests. So we want to be able to communicate that in advance that we've already done the work. And it was a years long journey to understand that.
yeah,
So when I started down that path, I didn't know what a SOC 2 Type 2 was. And I got confused with SOX, the
yeah,
publicly traded company compliance
yeah,
at one point, and then there's like SOC Type 1, which is more of a financial audit. So it's
yeah,
actually pretty confusing. So you definitely want to spend the time to read the policies and the frameworks and learn more about it, understand it as the MSP or as the business. Then you can help your customers through that process.
yeah,
So you definitely want to experience it. It's like walking a mile in like someone's shoes, right? You don't
yeah,
understand
yeah.
what it means. So how
Right.
are you going to help your customers if you don't know
Yeah,
what
you
they're
don't
doing?
you don't know if those shoes hurt until you put them on.
Exactly.
It's
So we
fascinating.
will,
And I think that's
yeah.
that's one of the things that like obviously like over at FlexPoint we work with hundreds of MSPs, so we kind of see this all the time. But it's a great question, right? Like if you're, and I guess putting on my like business owner hat here, if I'm going to potentially work with an MSP, right, hire an MSP for my security needs, I would think that high up on that list of things that I would care about is that the MSP themselves is like using either the same level of tools that they're, trying to provide me or something more. And so I guess how common do you think that is? Like, I mean, like you mentioned the trust center. I mean, you look at most MSP websites, right? Like they probably don't have a trust center, but like how often do you think, or how common do you think it is for an MSP to be using sort of having the same approach or using the same tools for their own business, right? Versus, what they provide to their clients. Because I think you're right. I mean, that's a huge point of failure, right? If your MSP is not very secure, then how are they keeping you secure?
Well, the funniest thing is the audit firms don't have to be compliant themselves in many ways. So they don't even have their own trust portals. Many
Yeah.
vendors don't have trust portals, and many MSPs and overall many businesses don't really have trust portals. So when you need something, you can email them, you can talk to them, and it's not an efficient process. So making the trust portal actually makes the entire business more efficient. It makes the interactions more efficient, more high level. So it's better if you communicate, but most people don't do that. So
Yeah.
we're
Well, I
like
mean,
at
it's
the
more than
1%
just
right
the
now.
trust portal, right? It's like
Yeah,
I feel like the trust portal is like the outcome, right? It's what the
exactly.
proof
Yeah.
that you spent the last 3 years going through, a SOC audit and a process. Like how many, like if you had to think, like I mean, thinking about your peers out there, like how many MSPs out there are, SOC 1, SOC 2 compliant or, have these frameworks in place?
I've seen a few, but I would say maybe 10% or 20% at most,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
probably nothing more than that. And I think
Yeah.
the issue is cost, and it takes time. You have to dedicate labor. You also have to have the mindset for it. At least one or two people have to be dedicated to working together on this process. So
Mhm.
it's a long journey, and it's security is definitely a journey. It's not a destination that you arrive to. And so by us going through the process ourselves and learning about, what's required, how do we continuously achieve these goals, week by week, month by month, or quarter by quarter, or annually, like like a penetration test, then you figure out that, oh, there's all these costs that now are we have to bake into our business model. And
Mhm.
then our tooling, we also have to change out because now if a vendor doesn't have their own programs as well, then that means now we're spending more time to assess our vendor's risk. And that's something that MSP should definitely be looking at because many of the MSP tools that we have are agent based, meaning it's something you're installing on every single computer for all your clients. So what if one of those companies has a problem? And it's
Yeah.
happened a few times before in the
I
past,
mean,
right?
the
So
VSA hack
yeah,
being one of
right.
the bigger ones. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So
And so maybe on that topic, I mean, tell us a little bit about what you guys at Red Cup IT do to kind of solve for this. Like what are you asking your vendors? I mean, I know what you asked us, but what are you asking your security vendors that and like also maybe talk about like what that's resulted in, right? Because I know you guys use tools that are I would maybe not unconventional is not the right word, but like maybe tools that are better found in like the enterprise space versus, traditional tools that may be found in the MSP space. So maybe talk more about that.
okay, so one thing I always ask is, do you have a YubiKey, key, for example, or a hardware security key? Most of our customers are tech companies, so they have access to AWS, Azure, GitHub, source code. It's like crown jewels, and you need to protect
Yeah.
that. So hardware security key is a really good way to protect that. And so if you don't have that, then you're more likely to be at risk for like an info stealer, things like that. So that's something I always ask, and you could tell right away if somebody knows or doesn't know because if they're like, "Oh, I don't know if you have a YubiKey key or not," like you definitely don't because it's a physical key that you plug into your computer, so
Yeah.
you would definitely know
Yeah.
if you had one or not. And
Right.
it's a quick way. And then if they say, "I have to go ask somebody," then they'll say like, "I'm going to go ask my CISO," or then I'll know that okay, you have a security program because you have a CISO. If they're
Mhm.
gonna if their response is I'm going to go talk to my CTO or my COO or CIO, then or my head of engineering, then I'll start to get a sense of where they're at in their organizational structure and maturity as well as the vendor or as a
Yeah.
potential customer.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess in terms of again going back to um, you know, the idea that the MSP themselves should be. I mean, I think about it as like a fortress, right? It's like if you're out here trying to protect the rest of us, you better have some like really strong walls, right? So I guess what do you think? Like talking about MSPs specifically or MSSPs. Like, what do you think are the biggest threats from a security standpoint to an MSP right now, that you've encountered that you see just from your experience?
I think identity is definitely the number one thing that MSPs should be looking at. So you should definitely have your identity provider like Azure or whatever it is that you're using really lock down and leverage conditional access, leverage the policies to lock everything down and make it really difficult to get into your environment. And then once you're in the environment, make sure you're using privilege access management and time limited access so that you can grant admin when needed and then take it away when it's not needed. So you need to start building out that business logic and then the forms, the workflows in a way that doesn't slow down your company. And that's the hard part of security is
Yeah,
you definitely need or want the security, or it could be mandated, or it could be so risky that you need to do something and you can't ignore it, such as identity. And you want to do that in a way that doesn't slow your team down. So that's something that takes a lot of testing. You may have
yeah,
to go out into the market and look at Okta or Ping One or Duo, or all these different solutions, actually fully configure it, test it against each other and see what actually works for your culture, your team, and your risk profile as well as an MSP. And then think about your own customers. Like, what's the worst case that can happen and make sure your legal contracts are in place. But, you don't want to go to that point. You want to make
yeah,
sure that your tooling and your people process technology are set up properly so that if the
yeah,
worst happens, the blast radius is limited. So if, let's say one of your employees gets hacked, then you only want that to maybe affect their one computer
yeah,
and whatever apps they have access to. And like, how fast can you shut things down on that user if they are
yeah,
breached? Those are things that you
yeah,
should think about. So
Yeah.
for us, we have a kill switch. We can just suspend somebody and it'll
Yeah.
cascade down and lock everything out. Because we have an enterprise browser, we have Beyond Identity, which is a FIDO2 compliant passkey mechanism that authenticates us. Then we have Okta, then we have conditional access, and then we have the ZTNA SASE as well in the VPN. So even if some of these apps with skin provisioning, it could be there could be a delay. We have so many
Hmm.
layers that there's a kill chain for every app, and so it'll get killed at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Uh, yeah, I mean, it's just like even on our end, right? Like that's probably it's probably even a bigger uh thing for you all, but just in terms of like your employees, right? It's like you're only as good as your worst employee, right? When it comes from a security standpoint, like making sure that entry level person who has access to, and I mean, I'm sure from your all's perspective, it's like that entry level person probably doesn't have access to anything that's like, really impactful. But and that's where the challenges come. Um, so I guess looking ahead, I mean, I talk about this a lot, right? Like the MSP market is a market that's growing. Obviously, we see a ton of growth in the market. We talk about it all the time, like private equity firms investing in MSPs, et cetera. Which I think is leading to this big like maturity, right, in the market in terms of like not just what an MSP is, but service offerings and the business model. Where do you see sort of the next 5 years when it comes to like the MSP model and the MSSP model in terms of you talked a little bit about, the trusted advisor to the SMB, but like where do you see the sort of the next frontier when it comes to security and MSPs specifically?
I think MSPs are going to definitely have to factor in security more and more, and definitely because of cyber liability insurance, that's driving a lot of change at the customer level, and that's filtering up to the MSPs, which now have to check those boxes, right? Then your baseline plan is going to have to require EDR and email security, data backup, encryption, things like that. So things that your clients could tell you, oh, I don't want to pay for that, or I don't really need that. We're going to accept the risk, and now they're not allowed to anymore. So your foundational package or whatever your baseline plan is going to have to be a bit more robust than maybe it is now, where you
Yeah,
can get away with it and save your customers money and save yourself money as well. And I think
yeah,
budget um, is going to have to increase, and that's something that you'll have to talk to all of your customers about. And so
yeah,
thinking about that now and starting the conversation now so that they can plan that into their budget cycles and things like that is
yeah,
like part of being a partner, right? Is like, hey, this is
yeah,
coming, and maybe your customers are not asking you for security reviews right now, or maybe you don't have cyber liability insurance today, but you're probably going to want that in 6 months, a year. And once you get that, this is what the questionnaire looks like. These are the check boxes, and if
yeah,
you're not going to do that in house, we have to do it for you. So someone has
yeah,
to do it, otherwise you
yeah.
just won't qualify.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, that sounds like we're gonna enter a world of haves and have nots, right? Like you're gonna have the people who are able to get this in order and be able to communicate the value, and those that won't. So I mean, does that leave a gap in terms of, and again, it might be like smaller businesses, it might be some types of businesses, but do you think that's going to leave a gap in sort of security, right? Like if it comes down to, hey, like, I have a small business and, I just can't afford to have, X, Y, and Z, or do you think there's going to be, advances in technology, AI, things like that are going to make it more affordable for, even the smallest of businesses to have, everything they need from a security standpoint?
Think the benefit of MSPs is we should have buying power. We have thousands of seats under management. We can go to negotiate across all the distributors and vendors, and then cut the costs on our side. Hopefully, pass it along to the customer, and
Mhm.
then also we can look at open source tools like Wazoo is a free EDR that you can self host, and then you can put your customers under that. So there's different ways, and so that's something that MSPs can look at. You don't have to pay for a lot of tools. You actually don't have to pay for. They're just openly available on GitHub or GitLab, and they're out there. And there's whole communities around EDR tools, SIM tools,
Mhm.
threat hunting tools, and you can actually build an entire security program on an open source system, run it yourself, and then put all of your customers under that and give them protection without paying vendors. But you do have to do it yourself
Yeah,
and
that
hopefully
sounds like
maybe
a
like
lot of
staff
work.
up. It is a lot of work. So
It sounds like a
you're
lot
hitting,
of work for customers that are probably already price sensitive, right? So whether they
well,
appreciate it.
I'm talking about the MSP doing that work and
Yeah,
then charging the customer,
right.
maybe less than what it would cost if you went out and bought best in class tools.
Yeah,
So there is a way to do it. And then I think definitely using AI would save time too. So if you're able to use AI to run projects or build a chatbot that talks to your customers, then maybe you can spend half the time that you used to spend responding
yeah,
to messages on Teams and Slack or email or tickets, then that's another way to cut costs too. And
yeah,
IT is a cost center, so our job
yeah,
is to become more efficient and then pass the
yeah,
cost along.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's yeah, I mean it's an interesting I think it's an interesting uh I think there's a lot of reframing of what is done and what is provided. But awesome. So I do want to leave some time, Dan, for questions. We do have some interesting questions that were sent over earlier. So
Yeah.
I want to hit a couple of these. One of them was got my attention, which I think like even I as like, another vendor kind of this kind of resonated with me. So the question is like, what do you think about security fatigue? So there's multiple MDR, EDR, XDR, which I still don't know what XDR is myself, but like what do you think about the role of security fatigue, both on the MSP side, but in terms of their clients understanding the value and need there? I think it's a good. The reason why the question attracted me is like it's security fatigue, right? It's like literally every day I feel like I see there's a new, and I feel like in the last sentence you provided, I didn't know there's an open source EDR. So, yeah, like what are we getting to a point where we're just tired of the acronyms and we're like, do we actually know what any of them do?
Yeah, I think it should be the MSP's responsibility or the whoever's doing security or IT, like even internal teams, it should be their job to handle all the acronym soup that's out there. And
Yeah.
there was like CNAP, now there's like CSPM and the ASPM and XPM. I don't know, it's XXPM. It's just gonna once you run out of like
Acronym.
3 letters, you'll add fourth, and then maybe
Yeah.
they'll have five letter
Well,
acronyms in the
is a
future.
20
So
word 20 letter acronym still an acronym? Question
yeah,
for the audience.
yeah. So I think it's our job to learn, consume, train our teams to do that, and then communicate in a way that businesses and stakeholders understand that you want to speak to them in business terms, like risk and like here's how we can help you grow, but not grow your team sustainably or grow your business sustainably, or now you have, let's say you have an API endpoint that you're connecting to another company so you can transfer data about your transactions, and then as your business scales, maybe you're going to grow to 5 or 10 or 20 API endpoints so that you can transact for 20 times the revenue, 20 times the volume. So how do you do that sustainably? So you do need to talk to them in less technical ways, but still communicate the risks and the values and the change and things that we need to do together.
Yeah. No, I mean I think that's great advice. I mean, even from like my perspective as a consumer of security, right? It's just like I think you put it perfectly. It's like it it's sort of your role as again the trusted advisor to tell me what all these things are and why they matter in a way that, actually matters to me versus because at the end of the day, right, business owners, they care about outcomes and, why how you get there in terms of like what tool is used is ultimately not that it's irrelevant, but right, like it's ultimately you care more about the outcome than like the actual rule or the actual tool that's being used to accomplish it.
Definitely, yeah.
Got one last question here before we wrap up. But in terms which kind of resonates with what you were just talking about in terms of communication with clients. In terms of conveying complex security architecture, I guess is the typo there. What do you find is the easiest approach when discussing with potential new clients? So I guess the question is really like, how do you dumb things down for people like me who might not know the most technical side of the security the
Gotcha.
security
So
stack?
I think going back to like elementary school, it's show like we have show and tell. I think
Yeah.
that's
All
still the
right.
best. That's still the best way to do things, right?
Yeah.
So I could talk to you about security for another 3 hours, and I can give you visual diagrams and workflows and all sorts of things, and you'll start to understand it. But it's a universe of things. It's like so many different moving parts that it's really confusing, and it's a lot to wrap your head around. So the best way is like we're building a lab, and we can show like a potential customer like here's an unmanaged computer. Double click on the ransomware. It obviously runs and encrypts everything on a desktop, and then we have a fully managed computer. Execute the same ransomware, it'll get blocked. Nothing happens. So
Yeah.
that's I think that's the best way to show it, and then we can
I mean,
show like the
those dare campaigns in
yeah
the 80s were successful
yeah
for a reason, right?
yeah
What
to show the
your brain
normal
on,
lung.
yeah, your brain
Yeah,
on.
like the
Anyway,
black lungs and the red
awesome.
lungs.
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah,
Awesome. Well, Dan, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the Mac conference, and everyone else who tuned in. Thank you again. You'll find us on YouTube and LinkedIn and some other places, and tune in for the next one. Thank you again. All right, take care.